Good day, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, Roads and Highways, Tools to Enhance the User's Experience and Workflows. My name is Bonnie, and I will be your moderator for today's session. This session will be provided via both audio and web conference. Today's session is being recorded, and all participant lines will be muted during the session. This program will last approximately 60 minutes and will include a specific question and answer opportunities at the end of the program. If you have a question at any point during today's presentation, you may submit it via the questions box located in the GoToWebinar toolbox on your screen. Our speakers for today are Matt McCracken and Tim Sheldon. Timmons Group's Matt McCracken, Geospatial Transportation Practice Leader, and Tim Sheldon, Roads and Highways Expert, will present the webinar using lessons learned to evaluate new ideas and solutions to common roads and highways problems. This session will provide attendees with tools to remove data shrapnel that creates gaps and overlaps in events, improve their LRS data validation workflow, and enable them to better visualize their roads and highways changes. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Matt and Tim. Matt, please go ahead.
Thanks, Bonnie. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today. Today we had planned to cover 5 tools, but after laying that out, we were a bit over our time limit. So in the interest of keeping this webinar to an hour, we can really only cover 2 tools. If we did more, it may just be a little teaser of that tool and really wouldn't do it justice. But please, don't feel cheated. We'll do all 5 demos. It will just be in 2 webinars. We'll cover the validation tools, the desktop tools, and the event viewer on Thursday, September 14th, so please join us. We'll be sure to send an invite to the second webinar, and both webinars will be recorded and posted to our website. So let's get started. Over the past 5 years, Roads and Highways has really matured. It's currently being implemented or has been implemented in 30 DOTs across the country. Roads and Highways offers a geospatially focused way to manage roads and the attributes about them. But as users continue to desire more complete solutions and convenience, we have created specific tools to address their common needs. Our Geospatial Solutions Group has created several software solutions for roads and highways. We've created these software tools keeping several goals in mind. All of our tools have been created based upon partnerships with our clients. We have heard their issues and created technologies to solve them. To this point, I ask all of you listening, if you have ideas for different additional tools or issues, please keep voicing them at the RHUG, and also please let us know. We intend for all of our tools to quickly transform your business, so all of them are able to be installed, configured, and to conduct training all within one day. We understand that each DOT is unique and each of their data models are different, so we've designed these tools to be flexible and through configuration. So first up, we have our Find LRS Updates tool. We are all aware that Roads and Highways design technically separates the event editors and the network editors. The events are edited through the web and the network edits are performed through the desktop. This is also the case in most DOTs. Business units are separated from the core network editors. However, this does create a bit of a communication divide. As Roads and Highways is rolled out across the agency, communication about these changes typically flows back and forth between the core network editors. Our solution is really trying to address that communication gap. Now I'm going to turn it over to Tim, and he's going to give you a little bit more detail about this and show you a live demo.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate it. So this tool was built around the business case of a Roads and Highways event editor who doesn't have access to or prefers not to use desktop roads and highways or even ArcMap in their day-to-day work. So this will be a user responsible for data that is sensitive to the changes in the LRS, both route changes and event changes. So a good example, a specific example of this could be a traffic data group that needs to evaluate their data when a new route is added, a route is realigned, or the functional class of a route changes. So before I jump into this, I wanted to talk a little bit about the demo environment. So all the tools you're going to see me use today are installed in the Timmons Group development environment, or sandbox, if you will, just for fun. So the environment is set up so that I can wear any hat I need to, make any edits I need to in order to fully demonstrate the tools. So I guess the short version is your mileage may vary. So in your environment, you probably have considerably different access patterns, restrictions, fingerprint, ID, retina scanners, whatever you may have to lock down your environment. We don't have that in this case, so Try not to panic if you see me doing something that you wouldn't normally allow just anybody to do. So with that being said, let me make a couple of Roads and Highways desktop edits here just to give us something to look at in the Find LRS Updates tool. So this will be the first of many hats I wear for this, this webinar. So I'm going to take the role of a LRS network editor and just create or do a couple edits here for you. So first off, we'll create a new route. So many of you have worked with this or have seen us work with this in past webinars. So if you're curious about the details of what I'm doing, that webinar is a great place to get that information. You can see I'm very carefully choosing all of these things. So we'll go ahead and let Roads and Highways do its thing to create our new route. Just a little hang up there, thinking extra hard about it. All right, so that one is created. Let's go over here and realign one. What do we want to do? Let's put a little bump in this one. All right, so that realignment's done and our create route is done. So if we go ahead and save our edits, we can move away from desktop for now. Once it's done applying our edits to our events. All right. So let me change hats real quick. So I'm going to go ahead and be a, let's call me a planning analyst now. So let me just refresh this so you see where we're coming in. So this is an event editor application for someone in the planning group. Like I said, the hat I'll be wearing is a planning analyst. So let's go in here and make a couple of really scary functional class updates just to build out some more test data. All right, this looks like a good spot to break something. So I'll just make a couple of real quick edits here for you. So let's go and change the functional class from local to something simple like maybe interstate, for instance. So we'll go ahead and change the functional class on this entire route. You'll notice that I would never be hired anywhere as a planning technician making this an interstate, but hey, it's just a webinar, it's all for funds. All right, so then let's do one more edit just so we've got some stuff to look at. How about right here? All right, it doesn't want me to edit right there. Let's find a different place. All right, that's much better. So let's do another edit that would never ever happen. So we're just going to make this be local functional class right in the middle. All right, perfect. Now that we've got some edits made, let's change over and wear my third hat of the day so far. We're going through these pretty fast. We haven't been on this call that long. So this is going to be as a traffic event editor is what I'm going to call myself now, just to perpetuate my full-on identity crisis. All right, so let's talk about what we're here to talk about, the Find LRS Updates tool. So you can see it shows up here in the map ribbon at the top of my event editor. So we'll go ahead and click it. So to talk you through just a little bit about what we can see from the top down, the tool is going to show you which LRS version you're pointed at, which version of this application, Find LRS Updates, you're using. This is kind of handy in any troubleshooting or communication, or sometimes it's just nice to know what software version you're using. So a quick note about the integration of the tool with Event Editor. You can see that when I launched it, I didn't have to dock it or anything. It pops in just like any of your other Event Editor functions do, which is kind of cool. That you can easily toggle back and forth between this stuff just like you could any other native Event Editor items. So the remainder of this interface kind of shakes out like this. So the first important part is the search region, which, for lack of better words, changes the search region. So there's several options in this drop-down. So we can search everything, which, again, I don't have any more words to say. It'll let you search everything. You can search the current extent of where you're zoomed to. So if I click this and did a search now, it would just search, central and western North Carolina-ish there. The draw function would let me draw a rectangle and search inside that rectangle. The boundary function, which I think is probably the coolest one, lets you choose from the boundary layers that are found in your MXD map service that's driving this event editor. And then you can choose individual features from that map service. So in this case, it's a county boundary service, and I'm able to choose different county boundaries. I don't want to mess with that today because I've made edits all over the place, so I don't want to restrict myself just to one county. Part of the reason I'm doing this closing and opening repeatedly is just kind of to show you how easy it is to drop that window in there. So let's say we want to search everything. The next thing we need to look at is the edited date range. So the edited date range, we're trying to be just as clear as possible. This is the date that the technician physically clicked the button to make the edit in the software. This is completely independent of the Roads and Highways effective date that we all know and love. So when you launch the tool, as you see me do, 1,000 times so far in the last 30 seconds, it will default to showing you everything that's happened since yesterday. You can change these dates to whatever you like. The next thing down here is the network layers option. So the tool has two basic functions. Either it can search for changes to the network or it can search for changes to events. So in this case, if there was more than one network, we would see it here, but we only have one, so that's the one we get. The event layers, next box down. So you can search for any event that you have a service published for. So I say that carefully to illustrate that it's not just searching for changes that are in this event editor application. It's any service you have published in your enterprise. So this tool is highly configurable, and it's just one more configuration item that we can point to map services from anywhere in the enterprise to search for changes as a result of an LRS edit. So that takes care of the button rundown. Let's see what this thing actually does. So let's go back a little while. April 1st, little April 1st joke there. So we'll go ahead and click Search Network. And this fun box is related to the spiel I gave you earlier about this being a sandbox environment. So when this is on your production environment, you won't have to deal with this, but because it's a sandbox, that's what we have to deal with. I don't have a whole lot more to say about that. So you can see when I click Search Network, this is going to show me all of the different things that have happened to the LRS network between April 1st and today. So in this grid at the bottom, there's several buttons you're familiar with, probably familiar with these images, I should say. So there's a zoom to selection, there's a wait for it, flash selected feature. There's clear the highlights. You can highlight everything that's in this grid. And the purpose of that would be to export to CSV. This function is kind of cool. You could essentially use this as a way to build a to-do list. So if you had a technician that needed to search for changes and then update their data based on whatever those changes, they could run the query, export to CSV, and then just have a punch list of, yes, I reviewed this, no, I didn't, so on and so forth. The filter option filters things. Again, not really a way to say that any fancier. So we can have no filter, which is what it defaults to. We can have an edit details filter. When it says edit details, what it's referring to is the specific edit activity type that was used in desktop roads and highways to affect that change on the network. So you'll recognize these: create route, calibrate, reverse, so on and so forth. So you can check on and off as many of these as you want, and you can see behind this menu it's changing the number of results as I adjust the filter. So the fields that show up in this grid are partially end user configurable and then fully configurable from the administrative side. So what I mean is that I can sort up or down on whichever ones of these I want, and then I can drag and change the order, just simple stuff. But then an administrator can configure this for you. You can actually configure this to show any field that's available in your map service that gives your routes. So if we look at a couple of these, there's a whole bunch in here. Lots of these have a to date with them. So when it has a to date, what it's telling you is that that's a retired record. So it's usually a retired representation of the route is what it's trying to tell you. So if we pick one of these to look at, so we sort by route ID, or I could demonstrate the filter by route ID function. Let's look at this one. So there's two records here. So one has a to date and one does not. So when I click these, it's going to zoom to that route. So what you see here is a realign route activity, and then if I look at the same route ID and click it, you'll see the retired representation of that route. So between knowing that it was retired because it has a to date and the activity type, you can pretty well put together what the technician was doing here. So they did a realign, which caused the original representation to be retired. Let's look at a couple more just to make sure we've got it. Looking right at it. So this is a similar scenario where you've got one retired record and one active record. So the active one is referenced as an extend. I wonder who did that geometry. We'd fire that guy if he was editing routes, wouldn't we? So there's the old representation was extended basically. So to put the story back together, there's the retired one, evidenced by the to date and marked as retired here, and then there's the extend. So we know that the route used to look like this, and then somebody who probably doesn't edit routes for a living came in and extended it like so. So this one's a little bit different. I bet you can probably figure out about what I'm getting ready to say. The activity type here is retire route, excuse me. There's only one record and it has a to date. So, well, this route used to exist and they retired the entirety of the route. I've got one more here to show you I think is a little bit different. Oops. Here we go. So there's an activity type here that I think you guys probably realize doesn't actually exist in roads and highways. So there's not a remaining retired route function. What we've done here is if a technician comes in and retires part of a route, when we show you the active, what we do is we denote that part of the route was retired by saying this is the remainder of that retired operation, basically. Again, which you can tell by the presence or absence of the to date. So let's say we aren't as concerned with these route edits and we want to see some event edits. So let's change this back to Let's go with yesterday. And let's say we want to see functional class. We can search that event, and these are the results we get from that. So with our date range tighten up, we can see the effects of both the edits I made to the routes and the edits that I made to the routes kind of directly through the event editor. So what I'm getting at is the tool doesn't care who changed the event record. So it's going to show you changes that were made by the roads and highway software as it applied event behaviors, and it will show you changes that were made directly by an event editor. So if we expand the date range again, let's filter by route IDs and look at a couple of these. So what you can tell from these is that we've got sections of local route that were retired, local functional class that were retired, section of major collector that was retired, and then these will all be the remainder showing their functional class over here on the right. Now remember, these are the fields are configurable, so any fields that you decide to add to help you further put together the story, your administrator can do that for you. So I believe that's pretty much all I have to show you for Find LRS updates. I'm going to toss this back over to Matt to talk to you about the pricing of this tool.
My apologies. So since this tool is only deployed on the web server, we only have one pricing option for this tool. It is an enterprise software license. So for $25,000, you get one license of the enterprise software. You get a software package. You get an administrator guide. You get a user guide. We actually will provide the implementation support for you, and we'll provide one training session. As Esri continues to release updates, and most of our roads and highways users continue to frequently update their roads and highways environment, we're also going to support the upgrade as Event Editor has a number of changes happen to it through our annual maintenance. We'll also perform software enhancements as we hear updates that would be relevant for this tool in any of the software version upgrades. So next up, we'll start into the bulk tool set. This tool set was created to identify small and even tiny event measure errors. I think the RHUG has coined a term called data shrapnel for this type of thing. But this tool can run in two modes. There's a log-only mode, which actually flags all the data errors and writes them out to a file. People can then split that up or share that around to resolve them using their own workflows. Or we actually have a correct in bulk mode. This is really a power tool type mode, so please use caution if you decide to fix your errors in bulk, but we understand that might be necessary, so we want to be able to provide that capability. So I'm going to turn it over to Tim. He's going to give a detailed demonstration of what this looks like, and we're actually going to walk through some of the data errors and show you can visualize them a little bit better.
Thanks, Matt. So to add a little bit more detail to that, the bulk tool allows users to review and fix LRS event data gaps, overlaps, and route dominance inconsistencies through the ArcGIS desktop. It's an LRS tool that can be used to work with the event tables that Roads and Highways manages. So in essence, the tool is focused on the measure values found in the event feature classes, I believe is the best way to say that. So here's what the bulk tools look like. Just to say it one more time for the webinar, you'll probably hear it a couple more. This is a tool for a power user. Wouldn't give this to the person you just explained what a route is yesterday. Like this is for, I would say, a seasoned analyst. So the tool uses all the available layers in the table of contents. So those are the pieces of data you have to work with. The tool respects the data connections to those layers in the table of contents in addition to any definition queries you have in place. So I say that to say that if you remove or rename layers, you'll need to update your configuration file, which I'll walk you through in a little bit here. So always use versions. The tool, like I said, does respect the data connection that's behind the layer. So if you have a version in there, the edits that you let the tool make are only made in that version. So this is kind of your last safety net to basically to get you out of trouble in case you aren't able to undo something that you did in your edit session. So the tool requires an edit session, but just to be safe, we advise that you always use a version, so you've always got that that last back step of deleting a version if you aren't happy with whatever you change. So Matt mentioned this, but I want to talk a little bit more about it because I think it's a really cool feature. So the tool runs in two modes. So there's a log only mode. You can see a checkbox down here at the bottom to tell it to log only. So log only, think of it as giving the tool the ability to tell you what changes it wants to make without actually making those changes. And then in concert with log only, if you check write results to event table, you can use both of these as a way to fully understand the edits the tool wants to make. So kind of the workflow looks like, you do all your configuration and you select the routes that you want to run the tool on. And then you would check log only and write results to event table and go ahead and run it. And then you can review the output and make sure you're happy with that and you approve of those changes that the tool is going to make. It is a powerful tool. You can change a lot of things very easily, which can be great, or it can be really damaging if you're making changes that you didn't intend to. So I use Excel to view the logs. If you have Notepad++, that's a little bit better, but it's one of those you'll kind of get the hang of the way you like to view it as you use it. So with the logs, the tool logs more than just the outputs. It logs updates to the configuration. So if you're changing your configuration, decide you want to go back, you can go and review the logs and see what things you changed. And you'll get a new log entry with a unique name each time you launch the tool. So again, if you don't check log only, then the tool will actually make changes to your event measures in the version that you're connected to. So near the bottom of the tool, you may have seen there's a tolerance option here. So the tolerance is used to let the tool know essentially what size data issue you care about and what it needs to ignore. So if the tool finds an issue that is less than that tolerance, it'll tell you about it. It'll report it. It'll eventually try and fix it if you're not in log only mode. If it finds something that's outside that tolerance, it assumes that that's something you meant to do and it will ignore it. So if you're looking for gaps and a gap is outside, the measure distance of that gap is outside that tolerance, the tool will ignore it. So just as a matter of point, the tool uses calibration points as the source of the tool's measurement data, and therefore that's what you select in order to tell the tool which routes you want to process, which ones you want to examine for errors and potentially correct. So what functions does it actually do? I've been talking a lot about it. So these are the 8 functions that it does currently. So let me walk you through these. So this tool comes with a robust user guide. And in that user guide, there are diagrams of each one of these functions. And looking at those diagrams is a whole lot more entertaining than just watching my mouse move around while we discuss them. So the first one it will do is called end gap extension. So this is a place where the tool is looking for places at the end of the routes, basically where things don't line up. So it's going to find the highest measure of an event and compare it to the max measure of a route within that tolerance. And if it finds a gap or an overshoot, it will report it to you. So If in your report you see that the from mile point is higher than the to mile point, which is kind of backwards, that's basically telling you the tool is located at an overshoot. So just kind of to let you know, generating an event table for the gaps function only makes sense when the event is shorter than the route. If an event is longer than the route, you're not going to be able to visualize that. So the next one is the near zero negative measures. Hey, look, we're in sync. Cool. So this does basically the same thing, except that it does it at the beginning of the route. So data issues like this are often caused in like a data loading exercise where you may have a measure that's negative 0.0001 or something like that. So this function will find those. So next we have the interior gaps. So this is interior gaps or interior overlaps, as you can tell by the diagram here. And at the bottom there we show a corrected box. So the interior gap correction options are actually one of the things that that you select as you're going to run the function. So there's several options we'll click through now. So there's use previous value, in which case the tool examines the value ahead of the gap and then uses that as the value to fill the gap. The next one is use next value, in which case the tool looks at the value of the record after the gap and uses that value to fill the gap. Use adjoining average. What it's going to do is it's going to average the value of the record on either side of the gap and use that to write a new record to fill the gap. Use adjoining weighted average. There's a bunch of these, I'm telling you. So use adjoining weighted average is similar to the previous one, except it will take into consideration the length of that event record on either side of the gap and weight the value based on which record is longer. The next one is an extend to middle function, in which case it just takes the record before the gap and after the gap and moves them both to the middle. Event comparisons is the next function outside of the interior gaps function. So this tool, or sorry, this function finds events that don't start and stop at the same place, but they should. So in this diagram, we've got speed limit and guardrail. So if you set speed limit as your control and guardrail as your target, then sorry, I'm having some trouble with my screen here. Then what it would do is find places where the target event doesn't match up with the control event. So the next function is route dominance inconsistencies. So what this is going to do is going to analyze the route concurrency properties in your network. It's going to be able to draw an event layer for you that shows you where you have concurrency. And then if you choose, it can further analyze that and tell you where you have event data that's not assigned to the dominant route. We find most DOTs prefer event data assigned to the dominant route, so this is a great way to see if something has gone sideways in that editing process. So the next one is remove duplicate events. So this is going to use the event measures instead of the geometry to find duplicate events. And if you're not in log-only mode, it'll go ahead and remove all of the event records after the first one it finds. The next one is conflate events. This is a real simple conflation, and a good use case for this is our diagram. Actually, if you have if for some reason you had a point event that shared the same space with a line event and you wanted the value from the point event applied to the line event, this is what this conflation does. Fill data gaps is our last function of the tool, which differs a little bit from the interior gaps function in that it's not looking for a measure gap, it's looking for places where there is an event record, but it might not have a value. So in this diagram, you can see we have a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit record and a 45, but there's nothing assigned to the green one. So what the tool will do is use a set of logic, which we can show you in the next diagram. So there's some hard-coded logic that will examine the measures and the values of the records on either side of the gap and use that to determine what to fill that data gap with. So let's come back to the tool and look at some of the settings. So there's a lot of settings here. So again, it's a tool for a power user. This is part of why we say that, because there's so much to configure here. So at the top left of the screen are the available layers that you have in your table of contents. So with each one of these, you'll see as I click through these, this radio button at the bottom is changing. So the tool is looking for a calibration point, a mile point or network layer, a center line, and a center line sequence. And you may have noticed as I click through these, different fields in this area become active. So what the tool is looking for is for you to explain to it what your ALRS or what your LRS looks like. So calibration point, we configure that as a calibration point layer. We fill in the route ID, we fill in the measure field, so on and so forth for all of the available layers. The layers to process are the event layers that you want the tool to look at. So in this case, we're going to be reviewing the through lane event and the direction event for any errors. So as we click through these, there's another set of configurations that we need to do for each one. So for the through lane, we need to configure what the interior gap field is, and this ties back to how the tool fills those gaps. We specify route ID, we specify from measure and a to measure field. And then over at the far right is the data gap field. So these are the ones we specify that ties into the logic we showed you a minute ago that lets the tool determine how to fill that data gap. Moving on down here, this is where we're going to configure dominance rules. So the tool will ignore dominance if you leave all of this stuff blank. But typically what we're finding people would do is configure these rules to match the rules that you have in your ALRS. So given that, you'll probably recognize a lot of these terms. So what you're seeing here is these are the same basic concepts that you have in your ALRS that you've configured, where the rule is lesser, it's a numeric field, and then there is the specific field. So you can configure any number of different dominance rules you like, and it will run them in this order. So near the bottom, we have a few more things we have to configure. There's a log folder. So we point the tool to where it is on our machine that we want it to write the logs that we're going to be able to review. We tell it where we want it to store the event data that it creates. Excuse me, and we tell it where there's a Scratch geodatabase that it can use for some of its processing as it works through the checks that you've asked it to make. There's a setting over here for decimal precision. We suggest that you set this to the same precision as your ALRS, just to try and eliminate any issues with the tools getting a difference in precision as a gap or an overlap, and it kind of adds noise to the output. So that's a whole lot about the settings. Let's go ahead and run it and see what it does. So to run it, we need to select a set of calibration points. So I'm going to go ahead and close the tool again. We'll make sure that calibration point is selectable. And we'll draw a box and select a handful of these. So the tool is going to require me to be in an edit session. I'll go ahead and start that session now. We'll launch the tool. Let's go ahead and have it look for end gap extensions. I do want it to write me an event table. I want to leave this in log only because I don't want to make changes yet. I kind of want to see what it's going to find. And then let's go ahead and run it. So this window comes up basically to drive home that this tool can make a lot of edits at one time. So what this is telling me is that I need to be in an edit session. I am in an edit session It just wants to make sure that I understand what's going on. So yes, I do want to continue. So that was a really quick execution. The tool actually just went ahead and ran right then. So what this menu is telling me is that total records matched were 32. Records mismatched were 2 records. So somewhere in those calibration points, which were used to generate that set of unique route IDs for it to review, it found 2 issues. So we'll go ahead and say okay. It can think about it being okay. And then let's go and look at that. So we get 2 new event tables here, you can see. It builds us an event table for, well, it makes sense, for each event that it's going to check. So if we wanted to look at the through lane, here's one of the issues that it found. So these are what your event tables will look like. It's regular event table, so it gives you a route ID, measures, and then it tells you in a description the issue that it found. So in this case, it's showing us the difference in from mile point and to mile point, and where you see different precisions, this is due to the test data we're using here having a different precision on the calibration point and the route versus the event tables. But it's kind of an example of what you'll get when you run the tool. So if we open a different one here, I can show you a little bit more. So this is kind of what you would see if you had selected, you know, a much higher number of calibration points. And this table will get as big as it needs to get to show you everything that it found. So you can draw this as an event layer in ArcGIS if you want to go in and review those. Like I said, if it's an internal gap, you would be able to visualize it. And use that as a pretty powerful analysis tool to look at the health of your event data. So a couple items of note. There's a button here called Get Locks. So I'd like to talk about that for just a minute. So if a route is locked and you run the tool against it, the tool goes ahead and runs. The event data, you know, may or may not be updated. So I guess the short story is that the tool really doesn't care about locks, which is somewhat dangerous, is what you may be thinking to yourself. So it's kind of bad practice to try and edit anything about an event table that is locked, or you know that is associated with a route that's locked. So what this function does is when you execute this, it will build you a comma-separated file of all the route IDs that are currently locked, which you can then use to write a definition query against your calibration point layer. So these are routes that you would essentially restrict yourself from touching. So remember, the tool is very conscious of the table of contents, so that's why the definition query function is allowed to work here. The tool is impartial to self-intersecting routes. So if you have lollipops or fish routes, you know, as long as those routes have measures and events on them, the tool doesn't really care about the shape. It's only looking at those event feature classes. I mentioned earlier, I kind of like to say it again about the precision. The tool will function much better if you have uniform precision among your calibration points, your routes, and your events. So when you're actually running the tool, when you do decide that what the tool has found is okay to fix and you take it out of log-only mode, keep in mind that the tool is going to update the event feature class tables, but not the shapes. So what you need to do then is go back into roads and highways and regenerate those event shapes so that you can see in a spatial fashion what the tool did to your event features. So you've seen me select, how many did we select? It doesn't want to go away. You saw me select, I don't know, what's that, maybe 100 calibration points. So the number of calibration points you select is just something you do experiment with. Maybe select a county at a time or 5 or 6 counties. The tool will run as many as you want. But it may come down to the horsepower of your computer may not be high enough to run what you want to run. And to speak to that a little bit, it's advised to have indexes on the route ID and the from and to measure which will help speed up the tools significantly. So I think that covers it for bulk updates tool. I'm going to give this back to Matt to talk about the pricing for this one.
So we have a couple ways to price out the bulk tools. It is just an ArcMap add-in, so we're able to offer this as both as a single user and also an enterprise license. In the single user pricing, you're going to get a named user license, a user guide, the implementation support, and a training session. At the enterprise level, we're going to give you the ability to license this to as many people at your organization as you would like. We also provide the user guide, implementation support, and one training session. So I think now we have a little bit more time. Tim went a little faster than planned, but that's a good thing because we can take a few questions.
Thank you. At this time, we will again be taking questions from our participants. Please use the questions box in the GoToWebinar toolbox on the side of your screen to submit a question. A copy of today's PowerPoint is available to attendees upon completion of today's program. If you would like to obtain a digital copy of today's PowerPoint presentation, please email the address that is provided on your screen. We do have a few questions already in the queue. The first question, does the Find LRS updates tool only find edits made in the user's version?
So that's a good question. So the tool can find any edits in the enterprise, and it's concerned with the version that you are connected to. So if you've got edits in the enterprise that you want to be able to search, all you would need to do is just reconcile that version. So you would have those edits in your edit version, and then you would be able to see any of those changes from the enterprise.
Thank you, Tim. Next question is, can I exclude routes from review by the bulk tools?
Yes, definitely. That's what I was referring to about establishing a definition query. So anything you can write into a definition query to otherwise exclude routes from any other regular ArcGIS processing, you can do for the purpose of bulk tools. So however you can dream up that query is what you can exclude.
All right, next question. How often are your tools updated?
Matt, you want to handle that one?
We intend to follow the Esri release schedule and submit version upgrades as Esri has versions of software available. That will include some upgrades and enhancements to these tools as we are able to fit into those version upgrades.
Great, thank you, Matt. Final question is, can I edit records from the Find LRS Updates results grid?
I believe the short answer is no. So what I think that's referring to is when you're in here, having some technical difficulties, is mostly in the chair. Wait for it to come up. There we go. All right. So I think what that question is referring to is when there are records displayed here, can you use these as kind of a jumping off point to edit? And the answer is no. So when you click this, it turns the feature red and it zooms to it. But this is more of just an indication of a change. It's not really the same as the workflow where you come in and actually edit a feature. So what this would do is guide you to a location where you could then go back into your edit events widgets and make whatever event edits you need to based on whatever changes you found.
Thank you, Tim. Since we are approaching our time limit, any further questions submitted, we will have Matt or Tim reach out to you directly via phone or email. Matt or Tim, do you have any final comments? All right. Thank you everyone for attending. That concludes our online program. Thank you to our presenters and all of today's participants. The program has now ended. You may now disconnect.